It's 1954. Guy is just 3 years old. He's crying, he's begging, but no one listens. 2 attendants pin his tiny limbs to the cold metal table as the doctor places electrodes on his temples. And then, it starts. If you find past human experiments, wartime atrocities, and underwater accidents as fascinating as I do, subscribe to my channel, and you'll get a new story each week. Meet Dr. Loretta Bender, a prominent child neuropsychiatrist in the 1940s and 50s. Praised, respected, published, and celebrated. You can still find her publications today if you Google. But behind the polished credentials was a woman running experiments that would make even the most hardened investigator shudder. Between 1940 and 1953 at Bellevue Hospital in New York, Dr. Bender treated children diagnosed with what she called autistic schizophrenia. Her treatment of choice? Electroconvulsive therapy, or ECT. We're not talking about 1 or 2 isolated cases. She shocked over 100 children, some as young as 3 years old. Other reports suggest the number may have been closer to 200. One hospital where she worked, Creedmoor State Hospital, reportedly administered shock therapy to over 500 children between the 1940s and 1960s. Now here's where things go from controversial to downright chilling. Dr. Bender was no fringe quack. She was highly respected. She gave lectures, she published papers, she was confident and untouchable. Publicly, she said the shock treatments were working, that they made the children happier, more manageable. So Jacqueline Suzanne, who was a rising star in the literary world, turned to her for help. Before the fame, she was just a mother, desperate to help her son, Guy, who had been diagnosed with autism. Guy was only 3 years old when he started electroshock therapy. When he returned home, he wasn't the same. He was lifeless, unresponsive. Suzanne later told friends that Dr. Bender had destroyed her son. Guy was never the same again and would spend the rest of his life in institutions. But publicly, Dr. Bender was still a success. In one of her papers, she wrote, "Many of the medical treatment measures have been sufficiently successful in some cases and partially successful in an increasing number of cases to justify a search for more potent agents." Privately, well, she admitted the results were disappointing. Many children showed no improvement or got much worse. You'd think that with results like this, there'd be outrage, investigations, lawsuits, but there weren't. Some of Dr. Bender's colleagues quietly called her methods scandalous, but almost none of them spoke up. One of the few who did was Dr. Leon Eisenberg, a respected psychiatrist and autism researcher. He said Bender insisted her patients were improving, even as they arrived at backup hospitals like Rockland State worse off than when they started. And still, she kept going. Some previously quiet and calm children after several treatments became violent and unpredictable. It's even whispered, but without concrete evidence, that there was a case where a once bubbly and curious girl was turned into a murderer. And that was just part 1 in Dr. Bender's story. In 1955, Dr. Bender began receiving glowing reports about LSD, a psychedelic compound being studied in Europe and America. The claims? That it can reboot the mind, calm violent patients, and reveal suppressed trauma. To Bender, it sounded like a miracle. Maybe this could be something even more effective and less messy than shock therapy. So she reached out, and what she found was a network of doctors, brilliant, well-connected, and many of them secretly tied to some of the CIA's darkest programs. They had names like Abramson, Hawk, Isbell, Elkes, Hubbard. Some of these you might recognize, and they were running experiments under covert government projects known as MK Ultra and Artichoke. Their specialty, mind control, drug research, psychological warfare, and now they were whispering about a drug that could open the brain like a door. And Dr. Bender was listening. She saw LSD not as dangerous, but as an opportunity. In one paper she wrote, "With awareness of the current interest in LSD-25 as a therapeutic agent, it occurred to us that LSD might be effective in breaking through the autistic defense in chronically regressed, retarded, mute, and withdrawn children." And so she tested. with actual children who had given no consent. Imagine this. A small windowless room inside a psychiatric hospital is lit by a single fluorescent bulb. Inside, a child, no older than 10, sits quietly. Moments ago, he was injected with something the doctor called medicine. Now he's starting to feel it. His eyes widen. He starts to cry, then laugh, then cry again. He reaches out to the doctor, but the doctor doesn't comfort him. Doctor's taking notes. The drug of choice? LSD-25, along with a lesser-known compound called UML-491. Collaborating with colleagues Dr. Lothar Kalinowski and Dr. Siva Sankar, Dr. Bender administered these substances to autistic and schizophrenic children under her care. 12 children, all under the age of 12. In published reports, Bender and her team described the children's reactions as similar to those of adults. They noted mood swings, sudden bursts of laughter followed by crying, strange changes in behavior and social contact. Some children became withdrawn, others agitated. A few sat silently for hours, staring at the walls. These reactions weren't studied over months or years. There was no follow-up, no understanding of what these children would carry with them into adulthood. Only clinical notes, charts, observations, and then silence. To some in the psychiatric community, Bender was a pioneer, bold, fearless, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. But to others, she had crossed a line that should never be crossed, giving hallucinogens to children, many of whom were wards of the state with no family to protect them and no ability to say no. That wasn't research. That was something else entirely. But Dr. Bender wasn't the only one. One of the people she consulted with was Dr. John Buckman from England. Dr. Buckman worked in the Potwick unit that was partially financed by the CIA and within 10 years administered over 15,000 doses of LSD to about 900 patients, including children. In 1960, Dr. Buckman met two teenage sisters, Marion, 13, and Trudy, 15, who were sent in by their parents. Now, their names have been changed for privacy, but today Marion's an attorney and a college professor living in the western United States. Over 10 weeks, these two girls, bright, high-achieving, well-adjusted, would be subjected to 10 separate sessions of LSD treatment. They weren't sick, they weren't troubled. Both girls were doing great in school, had lots of friends, were healthy and happy. But their parents were convinced this would help. Truth to be told, it wasn't the children that needed therapy, it was the parents. Marion later recalled, "While highly successful professionally, my father was a tightly wound, rather angry and insecure man, an accomplished academic, but an industrial-strength narcissist. My mother was a submissive, obedient Catholic woman without much identity of her own, other than being a doctor's wife." Marion still remembers every detail. Each week for 10 weeks, she and Trudy were taken to the Chelsea clinic for an overnight stay. They were separated, each put in their own darkened room. Before the drug took hold, a brief check-in with Dr. Buckman. Nothing more than a few basic questions. No warning, no preparation. Then came the injection. Marion remembers terrifying hallucinations, insects crawling, twisting shapes, laughter followed by uncontrollable sobbing. At times I was so frightened by the hallucinations that I screamed and tried to escape from the room. Once she actually made it out into the hallway, but her mother forced her back into the room. And it didn't stop with the clinic. The never-ending nightmares would follow the girls long after. And 2 years after these experiments, Trudy would suffer a serious mental health breakdown. She never fully recovered. Marion shares that the loss of her sister has been a lifelong source of sorrow for her. "I attribute it to the LSD and its cover-up, whether the chemicals themselves caused her disintegration or not." Today, Marion tells her story not for sympathy, but as a warning. Because this didn't happen in secret bunkers. It happened in clinics by licensed professionals, under the banner of science. All this led Marion to become a medical ethicist, dedicating her life to studying how things like this happen. Because it wasn't just the drug, it was the deception, the lack of consent, the total failure to protect children from being used in a secretive, government-connected experiment. If you found this story intriguing, make sure to subscribe to my channel. Each week I aim to share one true story from the shameful past that everyone should know about. Until then, take care.